able to reach out to young people and help nurture them and help them to achieve the goals which they have. I think that this is extremely important, and I'm looking forward to the programs that are being put on by our Ministry of Youth, because I believe that these programs, once we help our youth to engage, will help to keep them on a path that is productive and that is going to bring them to a place of prosperity and success in their lives. And what that will do, that will take care of the future of Barbados and actually safeguard its democracy, because we take the time to educate them, help them to engage, help them to understand, and then give them opportunity to be able to express that and to be able to be a part of our future going forward. So I just want to congratulate colleagues on this, and thank you, Mr. Speaker, for your patience and opportunity to share those few thoughts.
Honourable representing Michael Sophies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to lend my voice to this very important debate which seeks to amend the Constitution yet again. And at the outset, I want to, as other colleagues have done, echo the sentiments and the gratitude to my constituents in St. Michael South East and to wider Barbados, because I believe I'm not only representative of St. Michael South East, but I believe that I represent all Barbadians in the way in which I conduct my tenure in public life. And therefore, I'm grateful to them for their continued support as well and encouragement to me throughout the course of my political career. I want to commend the Honourable Member for the City, who has made his maiden speech. I know others in the Chamber who are also new members will also take the opportunity in due course to do the same, and to say that this is particularly historic that we are debating a constitutional amendment which in part addresses the issue of youth and youth participation in the Chamber, and in particular to have a young man from the city who has demonstrated by his many levels of service a passion and a commitment and a dedication to helping not only young people, but certainly being able to be at the forefront of making a lot of social change across this country. I think this is truly a distinct honor to be in this chamber today, Mr. Speaker, to witness what we have seen here today. I too, Mr. Speaker, I'm proud today because, this is a Barbados Labour Party of which I know no other when it comes to political life. I have come out of the bosom of the Barbados Labour Party. I do so proudly, and I'm proud of the record, the long record of being able to come from a party that has made significant achievements in this country, that has basically blazed a trail and kept Barbadians punching above their weight for generations. I am proud to be associated with a party that at every stage of the country's development has tried to improve the lives of ordinary Barbadians, not of any one particular political party, but certainly for all Barbadians, and therefore by its policies has tried to undo some of the injustices that have taken place over the years. The Honourable Member for St. Joseph, the Honourable Prime Minister, and others have spoken before me and indicated that what we are really doing here is not uncharted waters, but rather it is really continuing what the Barbados Labour Party stands for, and certainly what we as a government stand for. And it simply isn't just about amending the Constitution just to make way for a young man to enter politics, or it's not simply about being able to give the opposition an opportunity to have a voice. I believe that this is very significant because it also speaks to the underlying philosophy of the Barbados Labour Party in being able to create opportunities for people to serve, to give people who ordinarily may not have a voice the opportunity to be heard. It allows us to be able to ensure that we preserve our democracy in a way that allows us, even though we have a 30-seat majority in this House, that we are able to still send a message that we are not pompous, we are not above ourselves, we don't feel that we know everything or that we can solve everything, but therefore that we are able to almost extend the olive branch to others to keep us on our toes, and certainly to be that other voice sometimes that we need to hear in a chamber such as this, as we proceed to make policy in the interests of the people. But the truth of the matter is that the party has often given young people the opportunity to serve. I benefited from being able to sit on 3 statutory boards when I was a lot younger, and benefited in such a way that even at the time I don't think I quite understood what the then Honourable Prime Minister Arthur was doing in giving me that opportunity as a young attorney. But I later came to appreciate how government worked. A lot of times as young people you want things to happen quickly. But by having that exposure, I understood that everything you want can't happen all at the same time. And equally that you had to understand the different layers of governance in order to be able to craft the policies and to do the things that were right by the people. And so I have seen this party also create opportunities where we encourage members to, on their statutory boards, to make sure that there is always a young person that sits on each of our statutory boards. I had the pleasure in education to appoint on each of the secondary school boards young people who, again, regardless of their political persuasion, were given the opportunity to serve and have done so in a commendable manner. I also am mindful that I was one of the 2 senators that was chosen at the time by the then Prime Minister Arthur to be in the Senate. At that time, the member for St. James North would have been in the Senate as well, senior to me, but at the time I was able to learn a lot from him because I was able to come into the Senate. When there are only 2 of you, you have the opportunity to read up on everything possible. You have the opportunity to cover all aspects of debate except the financial matters. And it was an opportunity for which I will be eternally grateful, Mr. Speaker, because it allowed me again to have a better understanding of politics, of government, and again to put into practice a lot of what I had come to learn and to understand even as a student of politics several years before. I say all that to say, sir, that this party has been consistent. And it has been consistent in creating opportunities. It has been consistent in, even with the member for the city, giving him opportunities as well through the Youth Parliament. When our current Prime Minister was then Minister of Education, we have been consistent in the way that we have worked with our young people to develop a youth manifesto, to be able to have them to weigh in on various aspects of policy and policy making. And we have also been consistent in relation to this particular amendment in that there is a recognition by the party that we cannot simply talk the talk but not walk the walk. That if it is that, just as I did as a young child, spoke on my first political platform at 16, understood that this was what I wanted to do, that I understood that I wanted to serve the people of my country, that I wanted to have a vested interest in the affairs of my country, that I wanted to be, as many of my colleagues have chosen to be firm craftsmen of our fate. That at the end of the day, that we all had this opportunity to be able to in a sense, be mentored and to be turned in a direction where we had this opportunity to be able to serve. And so, Mr. Speaker, when we look at this particular amendment and lowering of the age to accommodate a young man who is well known to this country, not just well known to members on this side, but certainly well known to the country and well known to the region, and that is really one of the main reasons why I have spoken today. Because the young man who is the subject of this particular constitutional amendment is a young man, Khalil Kofdewala, who I had the pleasure as Minister of Education of being able to engage with and to watch him demonstrate his fierce representation of young people in this country and throughout the region. I watched a young man articulate himself in such a way that I had to compare him to persons who had been in politics and certainly been as lawyers for decades, and know that this young man was not cut from the same cloth as others, that this young man had something to offer to this country. And that to wait another 5-10 years for him to be able to enter public life and to be able to be given the opportunity to serve, sir, I believe, like all of my colleagues, that we would be doing not only him an injustice, but all young people like him who are interested in politics, who are interested in policy making, who are interested in making a difference in this country. So you can refer to Khalil on this occasion, but I believe that this amendment is for Khalil and every single other young person who has an interest in this area and who has committed themselves to being able to serve their country and to do right by their nation. It also means, sir, that, when I look back at those who are in this chamber with me, I also am mindful that the path that I took, I think most of them knew I was interested in politics from a young age. But what is interesting is that there are some who serve in this chamber, a member for St. Michael South, the leader now of the Senate, who, when we were students of Barbados Community College, we believed that we could change the world. We didn't feel we could just change Barbados. We felt we could change the world. And just like the member for the city and others, we felt that everything was wrong, that nobody listened to us, and that basically we had to blaze a trail in our own way to be able to lead by example, not just complain, but to lead by example, to help to make the difference that we wanted to see in Barbados and certainly throughout the rest of the region and indeed the world. And in our own way, sir, I believe we have accomplished a lot of what we set out to do, a lot of what our conversations were about. But we did so because we had opportunities. We did so because there were mature people who believed in us. There were teachers, there were people all across the college and certainly in our lives who were willing to risk on us. And if nothing else, sir, I believe that all of us are firm in our belief that we must also risk on our young people as well. I think we've all benefited from Prime Minister at this point in time being able to risk on many of us and to give young people an opportunity. She has not moved from her position from the early days in terms of investing in youth and investing in youth in culture, investing in youth in the arts. We see it. We saw it in Freedom Square. We saw a vision for Barbados come alive from a leader of this country who conceptualized it from the time that she was Minister of Education and holding the portfolio for culture. And we saw the baby being matured into what it is today, sir. I say to you that we are fortunate in this chamber, and we're fortunate to be living in a time where we can actually control our destiny, where we don't just accept what it was in the Constitution over 50 years ago, but we are able now to say we want to change the Constitution to make it more relevant to us. And I think that for me, for this moment that we stand here to be able to do that, I think it is very significant that we are not afraid to go where nobody else has gone before. The others in the region can look at us and say, why are we opening up the thing for the parliament for young people to be able to come in and serve? Well, we do so because we have climbed up the backs of other young people, and we can't now push down the ladder because we have stood on the shoulders of others to be able to get where we are. So we have a responsibility to make sure that we open those doors, just as we understand as females in public life that we have been able to shatter the glass ceiling for women in this country and throughout the world by what we have now represented in this country of women in high places being able to do things to pull along other women, not because they are women, but because we understand the history and the difficulty that women have been confronted with in this country over the years. And we understand our responsibility to pave the way, to start to level the playing field so that young girls in this country and men who have young children who are female can also aspire to being the Prime Minister or the Deputy Prime Minister or the leader of the Senate or the president of this country. That is what the Barbados Labour Party philosophy is about. And so this is not just a constitutional amendment on its own. This is a philosophy of the Barbados Labour Party in which many of us have signed on to, many of us have bought into. And therefore, that is why we are here today, sir, to be able to give that freedom to our ability to express how we feel about the Barbados in which we want to live in, and the Barbados in which we want people to recognize and to want to come to work in as well. Constitutions all over the world have had changes, and when I think of the India's constitution has been amended 103 times. We're a small country. Ours has not had the same level of tampering with over the years. But it says to me that if a country like India could make amendments to its constitution, as the Honourable Member for St. Joseph said, it's a living constitution. It's a living document. It therefore means that you have, as policymakers, to be willing to make the changes that are necessary based on the society's changes over a period of time. The US Constitution has only had about 27 amendments in its history. But the truth of the matter is there have been 3 significant things which have occurred within the US Constitution that I want to make the point on, because people need to understand the context of why policymakers make changes. And perhaps then you will understand why this is significant in opening up the doors for other young people and certainly for democracy in this country to prevail. There was an amendment in the United States which was probably one of the most important amendments because it related to the rights of men and women never to be slaves again. And many of us have connections to the United States of America. I mean, I can't imagine a world in which, this would obtain, because that is not the society in which I have grown up. But I understand that there were people who were slaves. Our forefathers were slaves. But to have to enshrine in a constitution that people had basic rights, and certainly not only rights, but also so that they had to be respected in a way because they were of a particular color, says a lot about the fact that America had to put this into a constitution to enshrine certain basic rights for people. They also went as far as to indicate that with the 14th Amendment, which dealt with citizenship, that allowed persons born or naturalized in the U.S. To be able to vote. Again, another significant achievement for persons living in the United States and born into the United States. And then with the 19th Amendment, which followed the movement for women's suffrage in America, a key part of it required every state then to allow women to vote. Again, things that we take for granted. We were able, through the late Sir Grantley Adams, to be able to make the progress in Barbados to allow not only women to be able to vote, but to open up the doors for people of color to be able to vote. Another significant achievement in our history. So we are not tampering with the Constitution. When you look at why constitutions in many cases are changed, it is also to allow persons to be given additional rights as well, which the truth of the matter is no man has the right to determine whether people should have these fundamental rights and freedoms within a society. We as a party have said, we brought the Charter of Barbados to this chamber, and there were many who did not agree that we should take a position that people shouldn't be discriminated against on the basis of sex, of race, of age, of anything, political affiliation. But we stood firm and resolute in our position because we understand that what may have obtained before and what may have oppressed us before as a people must no longer be able to obtain in a 2022 Barbados. And we as policymakers were prepared to take the licks when it came, because we understood that people of all walks of life, no matter who they are, born in Barbados, must have the opportunity to be the best that they can be in this country. And the only way that we can ensure that people's rights are protected is if, as policymakers, we make it abundantly clear by enshrining these things, whether in the Constitution or by the passage of legislation in this chamber. It is also, Mr. Speaker, important to note that this party has also taken a position that, as it relates to the future of Barbados, and there's a group called Future Barbados, of which I am proud to have been associated with as well. Young people who have been educated in Barbados, but young people who have blazed a trail overseas by virtue of their access to tertiary education. and who want to give back to this country. Persons who, because of their love for country, they can live anywhere in the world. But these are all young people who the Prime Minister has put together this team to be able to work with them so that Bajans can find solutions for Bajan problems. And we have a responsibility to make sure that Barbadians of all walks of life, young people, old people, everybody, but in particular our youth, because they are the future, that they feel as though there is a place for them within this society, that there is a place for them, not just when it comes time to vote, but that they have a say through another young person or other young people to be able to represent their views and their interests in the House of Parliament. So we understand that people may not always agree with the positions that this administration may take. When we put toilets in the fields for the agricultural workers, people had a problem with that too. But we erased decades of injustice to ordinary workers in this country because we understood our responsibility to our people to not do what others had done before. We understood when we created the vending policy and the vending legislation that we had a responsibility for those who have come out of the bosom of slavery to create a better space for people to work in, to make sure that the areas where they are is sanitized, to make sure that people can still play their trade in a way that they are respected and that the others will respect them as well. We get it. We know that people feel we give too much to the vendors. But we don't retreat from our position. As a former member for the city has said, no retreat, no surrender. Because when we stand on the philosophy of the Barbados Labour Party, we stand on a sound philosophy that not only protects the members of the Barbados Labour Party, but is intended to protect all Barbadians across this country. So we know that there are some who feel that we ain't supposed to enfranchise those who are most vulnerable and give them houses and make sure that people are able to have a piece of this rock. We get that. We ain't gonna ever get consensus on everything. We know that. But it's a philosophy upon which we stand as a party which understands that by giving people a piece of the rock, that you empower them, you give them better social conditions, you therefore improve their economic conditions, and you make people have greater pride in who they are as well. We are also a party that through this constitutional amendment is also demonstrating in relation to the opposition that we are not afraid of any opposition in any chamber. Because we could, I telling you straight, if it was that we were the opposition or we were in the position of the Democratic Labour Party administration, I can tell you for a fact they would not be trying to do what we are trying to do today. It would not happen. But we are not afraid as a party to allow people to have a space. We have demonstrated it with our people's assemblies. We've demonstrated it with the Thorn Commission. We have demonstrated it at every juncture that we consult and consult and consult. That we try to get consensus as much as possible, because the one thing we understand is that maintaining our stability in this country is the one thing that we have been able to pride ourselves on through successive generations. And therefore, as the Prime Minister indicated earlier, she has limited her powers. You know, as the AG said, you know, when you hear the Prime Minister is a despot, I don't know of whom they speak. Because the truth of the matter is, you hear all the time the Prime Minister is all-powerful, or a Prime Minister is all-powerful. And I have watched over the course of the last few years a reduction in the powers of Prime Minister, to the point where you wonder to yourself, what are we really doing? But we understand that when you have power, you also have a greater responsibility to the people to make sure that the people are able to participate in the democracy as well. And so these provisions cannot just be seen on their own. They must be treated in such a way that they're understood in a context and an underlying philosophy of the Barbados Labour Party, of the Barbados government at this juncture in our history, and one upon which all Barbadians ought to be proud. There will be criticism, Mr. Speaker. There will be criticism from all circles. But as I said before, we understand the criticism, and we will temper the criticism as we have done over the course of the past few years. But the truth of the matter is that on every occasion that we have made these significant changes. Few weeks later, few months later, Barbados is heralded as blazing a trail in the region. Barbados is heralded for going where no other country has wanted to go, big or small. And I therefore say to this chamber, Mr. Speaker, that we must be proud Barbadians, we must be proud members of this government in defending the record, because the record is strong. And we have a leader who is not afraid to take the decisions and to work with us as 30 MPs to be able to do the things that are right by this country. And so therefore, I have but just one thing left to say, that I totally support these amendments. Perhaps it has highlighted the fact that the opposition, whatever the party is, need to get their act together. And perhaps that is what has come out from what we are attempting to do. But that is a matter for them to deal with, to determine who is their leader, to determine how they put their parties back together. But what we understand is that we're going to allow our young people to participate, and we're going to give voice to the people who stand in the breach as an opposition in this country. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of the sitting until 4 p.m.
The question is that this honorable chairman be suspended until 4 p.m. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honorable chamber stands suspended until 4 p.m. This sitting is resumed. Honourable Member for St. Joseph.
Mr. Speaker, as small as these amendments may seem, I believe that today represents a seminal moment in the history of this Parliament, and it demonstrates clearly our commitment to casting off some of those things that could be regarded as shackles. And perhaps also important is the fact that we have opened a new parliamentary term and set the tone by demonstrating clearly to the country that we are prepared perhaps to go where other parliaments have not gone before. As the Prime Minister has talked about the challenges that will face our country in the years ahead, it is clear to me and certainly to the other members of the front bench that this is a time for visionary leadership. And today, I think, sets the tone and makes it clear to the country that we represent that visionary leadership and perhaps the best chance that Barbados has of making it through the difficult waters ahead. The question of when and how we deal with the matters of the new constitution will be answered very shortly. I know that the public is, in many quarters, anxious to know how we're going to proceed. The new constitution has in fact been drafted years ago. The current Prime Minister had responsibility for producing that draft when she last sat in the chair of Attorney General. But nothing was done with it on that occasion, and perhaps nothing was done because this Parliament, as it was then constituted, smarted at the time from challenges about republicanism and so on. It's interesting to know that we too were challenged on the issue of republicanism, and we met those challenges head on. We took the difficult decisions that we had to take, and here we are. Nobody feels that Barbados is a worse off country. Nobody feels that our governance has suffered. In fact, I note with interest that the opposition's only contribution to the issue of republicanism in their manifesto was that we should change the name from Barbados to the Republic of Barbados. After all the brouhaha and the moaning and the wailing that we were headed to hell in a handbasket, that was their contribution to the whole exercise. I make that point then to say that perhaps as we approach difficult issues, we should be stronger and more confident in our ability and in our capacity to make the best decisions for our country. So we have to deal with the matter of a new constitution for Barbados. The Prime Minister has charged me as Senior Minister responsibility for governance with putting those arrangements in place. And I anticipate that certainly within the next 4 weeks or so, we ought to be able to come to the country and say with precision who will constitute the review commission, and we've already begun to consider the individuals who we think are sound enough intellectually and who have the kind of experience and gravitas that we would want. So that exercise has begun. The constitution that the Prime Minister was responsible for, the new constitution that she was responsible for drafting not long ago, I don't want to say decades ago for fear of being chastised for aging her. Obviously, there are changes that will have to be made and that have been made to that. So, for example, that constitution, while it considered the issue of the president, that constitution can now draw into its paragraphs and clauses what we have recently passed as the parliamentary arrangements in relation to the president. They will obviously include some of what we've done today. So I expect, and again urge and encourage all Barbadians to seize the opportunity to participate in crafting a constitution that will perhaps carry Barbados forward for the next 5 decades. Mindful always that even as a new constitution, it will not be perfect, but it will be as perfect as we can make it. It will not be frozen in time, but that too will be a living document, and that future parliaments should never, ever, ever be too cowardly, be too diffident about changing it when the circumstances of the moment require. Let me thank members of this chamber for supporting this bill in the wholehearted way in which they've supported it. And with that, so I beg again to ask that this bill be read a second time.
Beg second.
Question is that the aforementioned bill be read a second time. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that you do now leave the chair and that this House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that the Speaker do now leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
This House is now in committee.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 1 stand part.
Beg second.
The question is, Clause 1 stands part. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no.
You go wait, you know.
Clause 2?
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 2 stand part.
Question is, Clause 2 stand part. All honourable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All the honourable members against say no. I think the ayes have it.
Clause 3?
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 3 stand part.
Beg second that.
Question is that Clause 3 stands part. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those against say no. Thinks the ayes have it.
Clause 4?
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 4 stand part.
Beg second that.
The question is that Clause 4 stand part. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those honourable members against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do now report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee.
Beg second that.
The question is that I report to the Speaker passing of one bill. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Think the ayes have it.
The chairman of committees is reporting the passing of one bill in committee. Honourable Member St. Joseph.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a third time.
Beg second that.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be read a third time. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill do now pass and be cited as the Constitution Amendment Bill 2020, Amendment Act 2022.
Beg second that.
call the names on line first. Would you please put, please put the question again?
The question is that the bill do not pass. This requires a constitutional, because it's constitutional, it requires a two-thirds majority in this chamber.
Call the vote on it. Ms. Motley?
Aye.
Mr. Simmons?
Aye.
Mr. Ford?
Aye.
Mr. Sutherland? Ms. Bradshaw?
Aye.
Mr. Marshall?
Aye.
Mr. Weir?
Aye.
Mr. Abrams?
Aye.
Mr. Rowe?
Aye.
Mr. Gibbs?
Aye.
Ms. Ford?
Aye.
Dr. Brown? Mr. Goodenagel? Mr. Humphrey? Ms. Cadell?
Aye.
Ms. Husbands? Mr. Griffith?
Aye.
Mr. Springer?
Aye.
Mr. Strawn? Mr. Prescott? Mr. Hinkson? Mr. Lane? Ms. Moore?
Aye.
Ms. McCanny? Mr. Ishmael?
Aye.
Mr. Phillips?
Aye.
Mr. Sutherland?
Aye. Aye.
Mrs. Speaker, 26 honorable members voted aye. There were no noes, there were no abstentions.
But I was on call.
He did.
I wasn't invited to vote.
How did you vote, sir? Mrs. Simmons?
Aye.
The vote having reached the threshold as is required by the Constitution, this bill now stands passed.
Mrs. Speaker, would like to revert to cabinet notices. Government notices.
Honourable Leader, government business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice of the Barbados Metrology Bill 2022 and the Road Traffic Amendment Bill 2022, as well as the Water Reuse Bill 2022. And I wish to withdraw the previous Water Reuse Bill, Barbados Metrology Bill, and the Road Traffic Amendment Bill.
First reading of bills.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the first reading of the Barbados Metrology Bill, the Road Traffic Amendment Bill, and the Water Reuse Bill, all of 2022.
The question,
Wait a second up.
the question is that the aforementioned bill be read here first time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With that, we have come to the end of today's sitting. I therefore, again, want to just echo the sentiments of all and thank all honourable members who have spoken, and again to welcome all new members to the chamber and those who have come back again for another time. And to say that we will beg to move the adjournment of the House until next week, the 15th of February.
Beg to second up.
I remember you didn't mention the time.
At 10 a.m., sir.
The question is that this honourable chamber stands adjourned until Tuesday, the 15th day of February 2022 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This honourable chamber stands adjourned until the 15th day of February 2022 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon.